Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Church on the Green, located in New Haven, Connecticut. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are invited and welcome. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministry at United Church on the Green, please visit our website at unitednewhaven.org. Thank you.
This morning's reading is from Mark chapter 7, verses 24 to 37. From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syro-Phoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went away of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee, in the region of Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers in his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha, be opened." And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." God is still speaking. Let the words be heard.
just beautiful. Will you pray with me, please? Dear God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our Redeemer. Amen. You know, as the daughter of a college professor, I always think of September as the fresh start of a year. As I said to the kids, it's like time for new beginnings. And what a marvelous Sunday that we can all be together. We can say welcome home to one another, although many of us were here all summer. But some of us have gone on good trips or have seen family or have had time away. But we're here together. Caesar is here in the sanctuary playing his favorite organ. We have the choir with us. We have children to come forward, and we have ice cream to share. It's a good Sunday, and I welcome you all personally. We're so glad you're here. Our New Testament is filled with Jesus' healings, and it always amazes me how he does it, from touching or from laying on his hands, to some just saying, be healed, to instructing others to just pick up their mat and walk, or go to a pool, or sometimes just through talking with them, or even just asking them if they want to be healed. He was a healer, and his healing ministry was known far and wide, and people flocked all over in order to be healed. Well, don't we all want to be healed? Don't we all need to be healed? Whether from depression or indifference or grief or bad relationships or a physical malady. There are healing needs all around us personally and in our society, from homophobia and racial inequality to angry political and economic divides. In the gospel reading this morning, there are two healing stories. But this is the lectionary reading that no minister ever wants to preach on. And I can't wait until our ice cream social outside time to hear how Renee and other people, other seminary students and wise people, might in some way fill me in on things that I might be missing. We often, so often, preach on Jesus' love of children and how we are to love all people. But this passage that was read earlier is a very difficult passage. And I'm wondering how many of you really picked up on some of the innuendos that were so very complicated and very difficult. Jesus is in the region of Tyre trying to avoid the crowds. But a Gentile woman comes up to him and begs him to drive the demon out of her daughter. But unbelievably, he practically calls her a dog and says that the healing is for the children of Israel first and then for the Gentiles. Wow. Wow, we've heard someone else refer to people as a dog in today's political climate. And we've all been horrified, haven't we? There are parts of this story that I don't like at all. What about you? In this reading, Jesus delineates the line of privilege clearly. Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Whatever do you think Jesus means here? Apparently, the woman continued and persisted in asking for healing, and she responds by cleverly saying, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And Jesus answers her, for saying that, you may go home. The demon has left your daughter. And sure enough, it is true. What I love about this part of the story is that she was a persistent woman. You see, she did not let in. She kept going. Now, many theologians have tried to excuse this account to the early rigid understanding of the time that this new religion was exclusively given to the Jews. Justice for the vulnerable is an overarching mission for this United Church on the Green. Numerous texts from the Old and New Testament encourage ancient and new audiences alike to treat the poor, the hungry, and the marginalized with fairness and equity, and cry against those who take advantage of those who are most vulnerable. In our own understanding of a loving and accepting God, the Markian Gospel's description of Jesus' rebuke of this woman with a suffering child can be very disconcerting. This Jesus who told the disciples to let the children come to him here calls this foreign woman and her child dogs. Now, clearly what we are seeing here is obviously Jesus is reflecting on the prejudices of Jesus' own day. But then Jesus changes his mind in response to the woman's argument and to her persistence. Jesus, our teacher here learns from a vulnerable foreign woman. Now, dear people, if Jesus could both teach and learn about justice for the vulnerable among us, so can we. Let's now pair this with the next story when he moves on to Sidon and in the area of the Decapolis, where he has just healed a man who was deaf and could hardly speak. Many pleaded with him to touch this man and lay hands upon him. But he did it in the strangest way. He put his fingers in the man's ears and then spit and touches the man's tongue. And then he said to him, "Open up." People were overcome with wonder, and they couldn't help but spread the good news. Now, dear people, taking these two stories together, it could clearly be seen as a case of discrimination. In the first, a person is denied healing, and in the second, it is it's complicated. He does it in a very complicated way. In the recent Christian century, there's a woman pastor in Chicago who says that this text reminds us of the reality that we see today in a world of the haves and the have-nots. There are some who benefit and receive, and others who simply have to wait in line. There is a stratification and there is hierarchy here. She goes on to say that exploring this text is very unsettling. So is uncovering the wounds of racism in relation to church complicity. Perhaps the directness of the dialogue between Jesus and this unnamed woman reminds us to name the differences and call out the hierarchies. In order to be delivered from these demons that hold our society hostage, we have to name these things clearly. This is the first step in the process toward full healing and restoration. People, this can be a time for new beginnings. Our churches need restoration and healing. If we as Christians don't make this our focus, the secular forms of society will continue to lag behind. We need to be on this critical, cutting edge. We, an active urban church here in New Haven, must continue to learn new things, address the racial divide over the sin of white privilege, the inhumane treatment of immigrants, and the tragedy of gender discrimination. Following Jesus' acts of healing, we are called to become more aware of how it is that we too must open up to these issues of justice. As the deaf and mute man was healed, Jesus shouted, "Open up." If we are to follow Jesus' invitation of healing to our plugged up ears, we need to know his prayers for us too. That is, we must open up. In this time of new beginnings, let us open up, dear people, and hear what God is calling us to do. Amen.